Thank you all so much for coming to the last Ethics for Lunch of 2019. I see that I have just run out of lunches, which is a sad situation, but a wonderful problem to have. That means that there's over 100 of you here, and so next year I will have to increase my ordering for larger capacity. Today I am thrilled to have some expert panelists with me. Dr. Kimberly Dawn Wisdom, the Chief Diversity Officer of the Henry Ford Health System, and also Patrick Uren, who's the Vice President of Human Resources for the Henry Ford Health System. Today's Ethics for Lunch is a little bit different than some of the ones we've done in the past, and that I'm actually sharing with you today a new policy and some of the reasonings for our policy. So the talk is titled, Yes, I Want Help, I Just Don't Want You. What to do when we face racist or biased patients. Right? How many of you have faced this in your career? All right. So I hope that we'll have some interesting discussions as we move on today. We're going to get started. This is what we're talking about. Going? Oh, it goes.
Bengali bitch.
Get away from me, cunt.
You fucking chink, go back to your country. Terrorist.
I've been told to learn to speak English. Every now and then I'll say a word incorrectly. Maybe I'll mispronounce it or if my accent comes out.
This country is for us white people.
You some kind of faggot.
Where are you even from? You're not my doctor. You shouldn't even be in this country. You don't belong here.
Now that Trump's in, you're out.
I hope that all of the Arabs die.
Where are you from? You really can't be from New York.
Get out of my country.
I just ask you, are you a man or a woman?
Oh, you're from New York? But where are you really from? Like India or somewhere, right?
Or are you here to clean after me? Are you here to take out the trash?
Oh, you're one of those women.
So where did you train? Where'd you go to med school? Like somewhere internationally?
So, this is thanks to our friends from NYU, Langone Health Center, used with their permission, as many of us in healthcare all across the nation are facing these issues. I think although they were from New York, we hear many of the same things in our healthcare institution across the system. It's not unusual. Why is this an ethical issue? Right? That's the primary question. At issue is a balance of rights. For patients, the right to medical care from a provider of their choice, and for physicians, the right to a workplace. And by physicians, it should be all medical staff, right? Physicians, nurses, environmental services, aides, PAs, all of our mid-levels, for everyone working in healthcare, the right to a workplace that's free of discrimination and harassment. So we're looking at health equity across everything. I think it's important. I'd like to bring up Patrick Uren to talk about our human resources and why this is so important for us as a system to address.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to give some relatively brief remarks, but I think somewhat pointed. Great case, point an example. Remember those difficult days when we had the Twin Tower tragedies that happened in New York? And everybody was kind of on edge after that happened. And I remember we had somebody at our front desk who had been with us, quite frankly, I'm sharing a personal story, but I think it's more important if I share the personal story, had been with us over 20 years. And somebody came in to visit a family member, and they had on beautiful hijabs, not unlike the hijabs you're wearing right now. Voila. And when you grow up in Southwest Australia, you can say voila and bienvenidos as quickly as you can say hello. And they came in with like flowers, and the person at the front desk said, well, what are these for? What are you doing? They explained they're bringing flowers to a loved one. And the person made the comment, well, how do I know you don't have a bomb hidden in the flowers? Now, I had that validated. I can tell you within 10 minutes of hearing that, we fired that person on the spot. Now, I don't like to use the word fire. It's a very strong word. It's a very violent word. But I think it's appropriate to that. And went to our grievance council because you have rights in this organization, and they upheld it. We don't tolerate that kind of behavior. It was disgusting. So, with this in mind, social media is not a friend. I was reading some things the other day with different opinion leaders. It was in the Wall Street Journal, how social media has changed the landscape and how we dialogue. Before, you might think something and you didn't blurt it out, you gave some thought process to it. Now people say anything. The number of things we see, the increase in hate speech, is just phenomenal. Now, maybe this has been in people all along. I don't know. I tend not to think so. But in HR, we seek not to be the politically correct police or to tell you what you can and can't say. But there are certain behaviors we are not going to accept. And that includes, when I talk about our employees, both in work and outside of work. There are certain things you can't say. We've had people do some things that are horrible. We had somebody who I can recall who was working at our Wyandotte facility, and they literally put online, they questioned their, I guess I was going to say their ability to work with patients who are Muslim. Well, I don't have any questions on that, and so I had a question whether they wanted to be with us still. I answered that question. You got to go somewhere else, right? Sharing that at large, everybody's kind of got itching powder right now with social media and the things that are going on. We take a zero tolerance policy toward violence and threats in the workplace. If any of you are ever subjected to violence from a patient, and let's define what violence is. Hitting, kicking, scratching, spitting. Spitting's a felony, by the way. We encourage our team members to file police charges. Now, I have a lot of violence that's happening right now in my behavioral unit at Wyandotte in particular. We're very mindful of that. And you might have somebody who has an emotional, structural disorder that is causing that. In all cases, we encourage our staff, file the charges, let the authorities figure it through. Now, whether you do or not is up to you, but here's why. We know resources are stretched, particularly when it comes to behavioral support. But if we don't get the system engaged, it will not engage. And so the violence that you tolerate today, and maybe you give a pass to tomorrow, and then you say, yeah, but they had this condition, it gets replicated till somebody says, officially somewhere, there is a problem. Because they might have the violence today at Henry Ford, tomorrow they have it at Beaumont, and then they have it at the DMC. And there's no record to track where the violent behaviors are happening. We would never force anybody to file charges, but we highly encourage it. If you see an act of violence or inappropriate behavior, here's what we do. We will send security with you to the police station. We will, as HR, go with you. We will always pay for you to go. Don't think you have to do this on your own. We'll get the police car. We got a bunch of them out here, right? There's 7 or 8. I'll give you the keys. We'll go together. We're trying to send the message. we don't tolerate violence in the workplace. When it comes to name calling the same things, you have the right to work in an environment where you can feel free of harassment because of who you are, however natural selection or God made you, or you become over time. And we're okay with that. There are times when we go to administratively discharge somebody. I remember early in my career when I was at the DMC, we had somebody who refused to be treated by any African American caregivers. So I did like Scooby-Doo. Huh? Zoink, Scoob! That's not going to work. And we sent an interdisciplinary team up there, and this was in, the late 80s when people were just kind of getting their heads around some of this. And we were very clear, and that's when Harper was really doing well with hearts, that it all moved over here, and now we do better. And we sent a team up there and said, if this is your preference, you have the right to make that request, but you need to go to another hospital. And we had lots of African Americans standing around, all of us looking at him saying, so what would you like to do? By the way, this guy was 2 sheets before his life was going another direction. He quickly thought twice about it and said, that may not be the best decision. I think I'll take who I get. Well, the nearer you are to death, the closer you are. I don't care who you are or where you are. I want your help. Many of you may know I had a massive heart attack 3 years ago. And I always teach us at new hire orientation. I survived, thanks. Do we have any cardiology people here today? Yeah, love my cardiology people. Thank you. Trust me, more than you know. I bought them pizza today. You're getting box lunch. They're eating pizza up in the cath lab. It's true. And sorry, we didn't run out of pizza for them. I made sure they had enough. But I share this because around me, I had people, Eastern Indian, African American, Anglo, people with hijabs on, and you really aren't thinking about what's behind, but people bring their ill-conceived notions and their issues with them. My goal is to share with you, speaking from senior administration, it makes me laugh. My dad never got past the 8th grade. My mom never got past the 6th. He was a housekeeper. When I say senior administration, I'm still Pat, but I carry that title in that way. I want you to understand something. Zero tolerance for threats and poor behavior to our people. The old saying, because I'm getting the minute more, but give me just a minute before I that. The old saying that the customer, the patient is always right, is not. Give me opiates. No, I'm on opiates. Are they right? Because I read something on Facebook or on the internet, now they're smarter than you are and all the education you have. It's not true. And so when our patients act out, when our visitors act out, we have an obligation to educate them and to help them understand. And if in the end they're unable to really acquiesce to our expectations, then we may not be the right place for them to be. Now, I like to help educate and get people there, but your safety will always be our guiding factor. If you are ever in a situation that's not safe, I handle the non-physician side of the house. Patrick Irwin, my cell phone number is online. Kathy Mackey, who's my good friend, who I love, and who's also of Arabic descent and is Muslim and has a special sensitivity to these issues. She's like my work wife, so we're like this. Neither of us will tolerate any of these inappropriate behaviors. Does that feel good? And that's, I guess, my main reason I'm here, to send back from senior leadership that we support you. And you know what? The easiest way to stop hating is to stop hating. So we're not only curing the body, we're curing the mind of a lot of people. And we're going to go that extra step to help cure them hate. Because you know what? Racism, hatred, it's kind of like high blood pressure. You don't know you have it, so you keel over from a stroke. So you're healing not just their bodies, but their minds and spirits. So keep that in mind. And we can help people walk out of here and become agents for positive change.
All right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Vote Patrick Irwin. No.
That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
So how big a problem is this? For me, this was a study that was done in August of 2017, and it was put out on WebMD, and it started a lot of talk in the ethics circles about the sort of prejudices that those of us working in healthcare have been subjected to. Has a patient ever made an offensive remark in your presence about your ethnicity, race, age, gender, accent, religion, political views, weight, medical education from outside the United States, sexual orientation, or any other biases? And you could see those rates are increasing and coming up. Some of the stats that came out of there were that really about a quarter of doctors have had an incident of bias that they've written about in their patients' records. Yet, only 10% report the bias to their administration or other authorities. So there is a disconnect between people who are being subject to these sorts of things and people that are reporting it and hoping that anything can be done. So that's a problem. This is a statement from a physician. Physicians are trained to work through subtle discrimination, like name-calling or constant questioning of credentials and skills. The notion that patients are customers whose whims and preferences must be respected helps fuel the willingness to indulge prejudice. We always are working out for our patients. We want our scores to be good, right? We want them to rate us as excellent. So sometimes we tolerate things that we feel internally we ought not. And that's a moral distress, just like any other moral distress that we have to carry with us. This doctor asked in an op-ed in the Chicago Tribune following the WebMD article, when a patient's a bigot, what can a doctor do? Why do we tolerate? Again, we believe erroneously that patients are merely consumers, that they can say anything. Customers sometimes have a belief that they can act on their bias and get what they want. Those old tapes in our head that the customer is always right. New concerns regarding the MD scars and telling ourselves, and this is what I hear from residents sometimes. They say, well, it doesn't really matter. We'll just trade. It doesn't matter. Those microaggressions build up over time, and it does contribute to those harms against us. That's not to say that there aren't clinically and ethically appropriate reasons why a patient might request a different physician or caregiver from the one assigned to him or her. As in many, many ethical issues, there's a significant gray area that surrounds preferences that patients ask for, and this needs to be addressed on a case-by-case basis, right? That being the case, it does not mean, however, that it takes away our need for clear guidelines when dealing with these abuses. With that in mind, we work to develop a process and a policy that would take into account patient preferences, the patient request for reassignment of healthcare providers. So this is a very broad policy and addresses anyone involved in your healthcare, right? So we have this policy, and we're going to go through it a little bit. I'm going to share some things with you, but I encourage you to go on and look at this, right? It is a responsibility of our organization, and Henry Ford Health System took this responsibility very seriously, and we worked for over a year to develop this policy with a very wide and diverse group. Operational leadership's responsibility is to create and maintain an atmosphere that is free of discrimination and harassment, and you heard from Patrick that they take this responsibility seriously. We also, though, if you look at the next red line, is we created a policy whose purpose is to ensure consistency in response and practice, right? We want to make sure that we are following a consistent policy and practice when we're carrying this out. It states very clear that if we determine that a patient's request is bigotry, racist, or biased in any way, then we can promote all of this all the way through administrative discharge, right? That's not to say that that's the first go-to thing that happens every time, because it doesn't. Patients who have capacity, right, that's an important part of it, and are medically stable, another important part of it, will be informed of our provision of qualified professional health caregivers to meet their needs. So, although we know that patients with capacity have the right to refuse any and all medical treatments, even those that are life-saving medical treatments, and if we do those against their refusal, we'll be committing battery, they do not have a corresponding right to declare anything except for emergency medical stabilization performed by a qualified medical professional. They can't pick, I want you or you or you. We provide them with a qualified medical professional to stabilize their emergency situations. That's the only right that they have to demand treatment. Importantly, if you look at this section 6.1.2, outpatients are different than inpatients. We encourage all of our patients, if they're selecting a primary care physician, to go to our website to get a provider of their choice. And we know that sometimes choosing someone who is culturally concurrent with your culture or primary language or gender or any number of other personal characteristics may make you more comfortable, and you want to have a provider of your choice. So we encourage that for outpatients. Inpatients are clearly a different situation, and they are addressed differently. So, a request for a caregiver of a particular gender can be considered ethically different than a patient request for a caregiver of a particular race, religion, culture, or other personal attribute. For example, some patients may request that their bodies not be exposed to members of the opposite sex due to cultural or religious beliefs, right? A deeply held belief, not a bias or a prejudice. And then, when it is possible, although not always, we may be able to accommodate that request. We have a rather complex algorithm, which is why I appreciate this opportunity to talk through it with you. It's not just one thing. In fact, you'll see that there are 5 different options when patients request an alternative caregiver. And out of those 5 different options, only one of them is this discharge by administrative discharge. The other 4 options allow us to try and work with the patient. The first one that's most important is if the patient is not medically stable, right? EMTALA tells us, and we all know, if the patient is unstable, we must treat the patient until the patient is stabilized, and then we can look at other options. The second one looks at if a patient is lacking in capacity. Think of someone who is maybe demented, right? Due to any number of dementing illnesses. Someone who maybe is substance abuse or alcohol abuse, right? They are clearly lacking in decision-making capacity at that point in time. In that point in time, we'll continue to treat the patient and use our best skills of persuasion and negotiation to attempt to get the patient to adjust their behavior. Oftentimes, this is a case when someone is lacking in capacity, whether they never had capacity or they are lacking in capacity now. We can enroll family helpers to help them. Dad, calm down. You can't do that. It's not appropriate. Dad, you need to watch your language. We can use family members to help us, or simply reminding them, Mr. Smith, I have told you 3 times that is not appropriate. This is your doctor. We're going to treat you well. We're well qualified to provide for your medical care. C, this is a case where we have a patient who may be making a legitimate request for change in care providers based upon religious or other concerns, or someone maybe who has a traumatic sort of illness in their past. Having a certain caregiver brings up traumatic feelings for them if they have post-traumatic stress disorder or other situations where really, once we discuss with them and share with them what's going on, it is appropriate to change care providers if we are able to do so. D would be the case where a patient has capacity, is requesting a change in providers due to bigotry or racist reasons, is showing disruptive behavior that cannot be altered. We have tried to talk with them. They are not agreeing, right? They do not desist when requested to, and nor do they accept the current care provider when explained that that provider is qualified. Then we may use administrative discharge or offer transfer to another hospital or another facility. Not to say that we can promise them anything once they get to that other facility, but certainly they have the right to transfer out of our system and into another if we can find an appropriate transfer. And when this situation happens, the 1 situation out of 5, we want to contact the nursing leader or whoever your one-up leader is. So if you're a physician, you contact your attending staff, your department head, you contact your one-up leader, whoever that might be, and then enroll the whole risk department to follow administrative discharge. That's a whole nother policy. It is referenced in this policy and also on our online training that you'll want to go to, but we're not going to talk about administrative discharge today. The last one is if you have a patient who is stable, has capacity, has requested an alternative care provider, is not disruptive, And then you work with that patient to limit their unacceptable behavior and explain to them if they do not, because they have the capacity to understand, if they do not desist their behavior, then you will progress to the administrative discharge policy. But we're giving them an opportunity to rectify their behavior and to be able to maintain their health care within our system, right? Important. The whole of this policy, as you heard from Patrick Irwin, is to protect our employees, to show you that you matter, the care that you give to patients is important. We are taking patients' rights and patient responsibilities seriously in what they have the responsibility to do in order to receive our quality care. So if this is a case, your leader should ask you, are you okay continuing to care for this patient? We've talked with them and they're agreeing now. But are you okay? Because we may change providers if our staff is requesting it. If they're saying, no, you know what? No, I do not want to go back in that patient's room. We will change providers if we're able to support our staff, not because of the patient's request, because we want to support our employees and our staff. So this is the algorithm. Isn't it pretty? This is like the 57th iteration of this algorithm. I'll be real honest. We have done this a long time. But if you look, you can see how it goes, right? So you start in the top left-hand corner and you evaluate. Is the patient stable? If the patient's not stable, we don't go any further. Outcome A, we treat the patient. If the patient's stable, then the clinical leader, whoever that is, assesses the patient. Does the patient have capacity? If the patient does not have capacity, then we're using persuasion and negotiation to treat the patient. At all of these, you'll see the endpoint is to file an RL report because it's important that we track how often this is going on. Those numbers that we saw on WebMD in that first study, I'm positive that they are woefully low. And you guys are positive that they are woefully low. The only way we're going to know better what's going on is if when it happens, everyone files an RL and we're consistent about that, regardless of what the outcome is, A, B, C, D, or E. If the patient does have capacity, then we look at, is it a clinically and ethically appropriate request, right? We talked about based upon gender preferences or perhaps post-traumatic stress, or maybe something oddball that we've never thought of. But when you have that discussion, what's going on? Tell me more. Using open-ended questions to find out more about that situation for patients that have capacity, then you will make an informed decision. Again, it's not a one-and-done option. It takes some finesse, which is why we need to talk about this and work through it. So it may be that we accommodate that request. If it's not one of those reasons, we think it is a biased request, then we look at, is the patient disruptive? If the patient is disruptive and they are not willing to change their behavior and go down to this box, then we could work towards an administrative discharge. If they are not disruptive, we discuss with them what it takes in order to continue to receive care, then we can do one of these things, right? Negotiate their behavior, offer transfer, or limit their unacceptable conduct with that knowledge that it could progress to an administrative discharge. So what does this look like? Okay. Hang on. How do I make it go? Go. No? Please go.
Hello, Mark. My name is Sarah, and I will be your nurse today in the PACU. How are you feeling? Can I get you or your wife some water?
I'm just feeling a bit groggy. Some water will be okay. Thank you.
Just ice for me. What is that you're wearing on your head?
Oh, I'm wearing a hijab. It's a religious garment.
Oh, are you one of those Muslims? Your religion is such a disgrace.
Yes, I am a Muslim. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm just going to go grab your water now.
Now hold on a minute.
Margaret, please let it go.
Mark, be quiet. Now, Sarah, have you heard the word of Jesus? I'm going to sit you down and show you these videos that I have that will help you realize why your religion is so backwards and screwed up. Christianity is a more peaceful religion than that Muslim stuff you guys practice. You don't see Christian terrorists ruining the world now, do you?
I'm sorry you feel that way, but I don't think this is a good time to be discussing religion right now. I'll just be back with your water.
You people are so stupid. You don't want to talk about the one true religion with me Because you're just brainwashed by your Muslim stuff. You don't actually know what you believe. You know what? I want a different nurse from Mark. I don't trust you with my husband's care.
Okay, I will talk to the nurse manager on staff right now. Hey, Diane.
Hi.
Can I speak to you for a minute?
Yes.
My patient's wife, Margaret, in bed number 5, has requested a different caregiver. She's indicated that she doesn't trust me because I'm Muslim. I didn't address religion in any way with the patient or his wife.
I'm sorry that the patient's wife has taken a stance that she does not trust your care based on your religious affiliation. The reassignment of caregivers based solely on this is against our current policy. I will speak with the patient. Would you be comfortable continuing care if the patient agrees?
Of course, I will do my best to care for him as usual.
Thank you. Hello, Mark. I'm the nurse manager for the post-anesthesia care unit. My name is Diane. Is this your wife?
Yes, it is.
Would you please tell me more about your request for a different nurse?
I don't understand what's wrong with this place. I simply do not want someone who does not believe in the Lord taking care of my husband.
I can assure you that Nurse Sarah will provide the highest level of care to you. It is against our current policy to reassign care providers based upon religious or other personal characteristics. Of course, you do always have the right to transfer to a different facility once you're medically stable to do so.
I'm okay with the nurse I have and will not discuss religion any further. Margaret, please, now is not the time.
Thank you for understanding, and I'm happy that you will continue your care here. But I do have to make it clear that any further discussion regarding religion will be grounds for us to review our current administrative discharge policy.
We understand.
And it all works out happily.
Discuss religion and view to continue care. I really appreciate your professional demeanor in this very personal matter. Are you okay still with caring for the patient?
Yes, I am.
If anything changes, please just let me know.
Thank you so much for your support.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I think that's a good example of how things can go, right? We're not going to think that it'll always be perfectly that way to start with. Oh, how did I get there? Oh, that's not where I want to be. Sorry. But what it does do is it shows us how it can go, right? That's what we're expecting. If you noticed in that slide, what was very important is the first thing the nurse manager did is she asked a really open-ended question. Can you tell me more about your request? Open-ended, not assuming, and inviting further conversation to hear what's going on and allow that to go. Then the scripting is, all of our care providers are highly qualified and skilled to provide you with excellent care, right? And that's true. And then the patient has options. You always have the right to transfer once you're stable to another facility. Otherwise, we expect you, right, to honor your responsibilities and accept the caregiver we have provided for you. In this case, as in this example, it is a family member who made the request, and that happens a lot. It's not the patient, so it's patients or family members. This policy applies to everyone in our care facility, right? So patients and their families, and it covers everyone in our facility, no matter who you are and what your role is. You can find out more about this going online and doing the training. And now, Dr. Kimberly Dawn Wisdom is going to talk to us some more about our commitment to support this and how we could really make this policy work with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful to see you. For one, I wanted to start off, Karen did a nice introduction, and I'm delighted to serve here at Henry Ford Health System as Senior Vice President of Community Health and Equity and the Chief Wellness and Diversity Officer, and that's why it's pertinent to the session today. But for one, I just want to take a moment and thank Karen, Dr. Smith, Patrick Irwin, AJ Evans, the team that put this entire protocol together. Can we just give them a round of applause? She said it went through 57 iterations, and it probably did go through just about 57 iterations, but it's indicative of the commitment of our system leaders to really ensuring that the people that take care of the people are well taken care of, and that's you. We definitely want to provide the highest quality care and service to our patients, but what's really important is that you're well taken care of and that we ensure that we create a safe environment for you to function in. So we want to take care of the people that take care of the people. That's very key and an underlying factor here. So I do want to mention that in May of 2017, looking at this policy, or going very deep in terms of this policy, was addressed in a very robust way. And probably not too long thereafter, maybe the end of 2018, early 2019, the policy went live, but it actually went before the Diversity Forum. I don't know how many of you have heard of Diversity Forum, but it's part of the diversity structure, diversity, equity, and inclusion structure for the system. And actually the person that leads that forum is Mr. Wright Lassiter, our CEO. So it came before him and a committee of senior leaders that looked and heard about the policy, and then from an HR standpoint, the policy was embraced. But then the heavy lifting occurred, because you want to make sure a policy isn't something that sits on a shelf, that you have to wonder if a policy exists. And you've probably heard over time, there have been various incidents that have occurred in the news regarding provider preferences that didn't go very well. So we want to ensure that at Henry Ford Health System, people, not only do we have a sound policy, which we do, but we want to ensure that that sound policy is then communicated to everyone. People know how to access that policy and utilize it on a regular basis, so you have it at your disposal. So January 2019 through current, now the Ethics Education Committee has worked on these materials, and now this is sort of the first rollout. Would you say that, Karen? This is the first public rollout of this, and so you all are the inaugural class. But what's important is that not only do we want you to hear this information, understand this information, but go online and take the training that's found on the next slide. I think I'm going to have to click down or go to slideshow. Let me just go to the slideshow here. If I go right there. Beautiful. Okay. How about that? Is that what's next?
That's you.
Okay, that's me. Okay. So, all right, let me click it also. It's all there. This fancy dancy PowerPoint presentation. Thank you for that, Karen. So the challenges to the implementation are, we know the huge teaching rollout to all employees on target actions and identification will involve your participation, but there is an online module. So in Henry Ford University, does everyone know how to get to Henry Ford University? You know, your annual mandatory education, the courses that you love to take. It's available there, where you not only have the ability to see more versions of the video, the sample video that you saw, but actually the protocol is there and the algorithm is there as well. So we don't expect you to memorize the algorithm here today, but know that that algorithm is available. So when you find yourself or your colleagues in a precarious situation where you know there's a challenge, you are the one that needs to say, I know there's a policy, I know where to find the policy, I know how to download and pull the algorithm off, and it's okay to follow that algorithm. Okay, but it's very important that you and your colleagues are protected and that our patients get the highest quality care. And if through all the options that Dr. Smith mentioned, it doesn't work, you have to know that an administrative discharge is not out of the realm of possibilities. You may have to go that route. Now, just in terms of just a bit of background before I go to the next bullet, I trained here. I came about 41 years ago, probably sat in one of these chairs right here as a medical student. And then did all my emergency medicine training here, as well as my internship and residency in emergency medicine. Then went off to serve at Fairlane for about 20 years, down in the emergency department here, and at Fairlane for about 20 years. And then went off to work in the Grand Home Administration, and then came back as a senior level administrator. But I say all that to say that working in the emergency department for 20 years, I came and I worked in Dearborn. So there were many, many, many instances where people were, probably daily, somebody asked me a lot of interesting questions about my training, about my age, about my credentials, about my race. There were always, so I just want to say that the overwhelming majority of the times, and mind you, these are, hundreds of thousands of people over 20 years, you could negotiate those, when people ask those questions, when they said things, you could, by and large, reason with people or reason with their family. So we're hoping that these incidences are few and far between in terms of having to pull down that protocol, but it's important to know where to find it, and that when you need to, we are there to support you and make sure that you're protected if a patient does have a bigotry-related request, and we can't, after going through all the steps, it can't be resolved. We know we must go through an administrative discharge, okay? And know that that is part. Huge training for resident staff and immediate actions will involve scripting, clear communication, role playing. So there'll be, a lot of teaching for the resident staff and a lot of rollout. So while you're in your various departments, please bring up that we ought to have a training, that we ought to have a time where we look at this protocol. You are like the first group of ambassadors that need to go forward, because we know that these requests do occur, and that we want to have the communication clear and ensure that people know where to receive the resources. Huge teaching rollout to leaders, house managers in responding, and it will involve scripting and maybe even some role playing. I also know that at from a leadership standpoint, we're going to take back what the work that's been done, because we presented it to that leadership group maybe almost a year ago. We'll take back sort of the rest of the story. Here now we have a very robust communications, a very sound protocol, and a very robust communication strategy in terms of rolling it out to the rest of the members. Okay, university. Henry Ford University, and I've asked you about that. This is a screenshot of what it actually looks like when you go on Henry Ford University, and there's the e-learning activity, and then, so those are the videos, and then you have the policy there that you can actually just pull it up and print it. So it's right there available. So even if it's not posted up on your bulletin board in your various work environment, know that that's all you have to do is go to Henry Ford University, pull it down, and it will be right there, readily accessible to you. And just follow it. Follow that 57 version protocol step by step, and of course work with your supervisor. Okay, Karen, is there anything else? Is there one more? Oh, well, that's your slide, so I'll let you advance that one. But I just want to thank you all for coming to this session, for your time and attention. I want to thank again the team for their tremendous work. It's been a real major labor in terms of their commitment to this area, and we want to know how much we appreciate you continue to carry the message.
We have time for some questions. If anybody has questions, this has been a lot, and it's been new. What questions do you have? Uh-huh. So just like when patients' families ask for second opinions or transfer to other institutions now, patients always have that right. That's not something new, right? So it's their option to transfer, and their option may be to seek transfer or be administratively discharged, right? But that option exists. And it may not always be possible, just like in other situations. Sometimes patients wish to transfer and it's not an option, so then their option choices are limited, right? So that happens. The question was, what happens if they choose transfer? Well, we will work towards that. It may not always be possible, but the responsibilities for their appropriate behavior remain the same, and their options could be limited during that time frame if their behavior is warranted. Any other questions? Uh-huh.
I want to know how you guys address the prejudice provided.
Did Patrick Irwin sneak out? I think he addressed that in his comments early on, that really, as healthcare providers, it's our obligation to provide care to everyone who enters our doors, regardless of any sort of differences. And that is a federal requirement, right? We are bound by federal requirements to provide all care free of any discrimination. So if that were a case, it should be also immediately elevated to leadership, and it would be handled very swiftly. I have no doubt if we have any racist or biased providers. The one thing I do want to say, we're running a little bit short of time, is on Henry Ford University just now, right, Brian? Like in the last hour. Okay. We have posted live this module for training. The module goes through with video scripts, with the scripting for every one of those 5 options, right? For when you have an unstable patient, when you have a stable patient, when you have a demented or impaired patient. So there's a video clip for all of those to go through, and it also goes through in more detail. So we kind of covered in broad strokes here today, and I only shared one of the videos with you, but we really have been working with the Ethics Education Subcommittee for the last year in writing scripts and getting actors and getting it filmed and putting it together. So I would encourage you to assign it to yourself and tell your friends to go and get that training. Please also, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me by email or by phone. If you want me to take the show on the road and come to your unit to do an in-service, we're happy to do that all across the system. We're going to be trying to get on agendas to share this education to make sure that, you know, this is a policy that becomes part of our culture and how we utilize it. So it's going to be incumbent on all of us to carry it forward.
I just, in line with what the young lady asked back there, is the fine line, is the patient stable or unstable? Because I know of a patient situation where the patient was very unstable, the patient's family, and the patient did not know he had schizophrenia. He's like 20-something, he was just diagnosed. And when he found out, he began flailing and he hit someone. And they called the police immediately, put him in handcuffs, put charges on him. And he was unstable. So
So here's the first question. Is the patient stable? Right? And EMTALA demands that the first thing we do is stabilize our patients. If you look at the Henry Ford training, the first video that goes through is a patient who's having a heart attack and the patient's not stable. Our first obligation is to stabilize all of our patients medically with a qualified healthcare professional. So that's always the first question. That's why it starts right there in a red box. Is a patient stable? And then we look at capacity and then we move on.
Person that had the vice provider, it starts with somebody.
Tammy, you need to come up here if you're going to answer.
It starts with reporting it. Somebody has to step up and report it. You can do it anonymously in RL. You can call the I Comply line and file a complaint anonymously if you don't want to use your name. But it starts with somebody reporting it. HR can't take a stance unless they know about it.
Yes.
I have a question about the VIP patient.
The VIP patient, a question about them.
You have a patient who's requesting not to have somebody who's inexperienced. That's, and this patient is supposedly VIP, whether they're a media person or whether they're a top person at Henry Ford Hospital.
So again, we go back to all patients have a right to refuse any medical treatment, including life-saving medical treatment. They do not necessarily have a corresponding right to demand specific care providers as long as we are providing them with a qualified care provider. And we assure that to all of our patients that they are being provided with qualified expert care providers. They always have the right to refuse who is assigned to them. They maintain that right.
So can I just add to that?
Yep.
Because, you know, as a nursing leader, we do, and in the ICU, we often get celebrity people. It's not always the patients that are requesting, but administration that are requesting to have certain care providers take care of them, which then the remainder of the staff feel discriminated against and saying, why am I not good enough to care for that patient?
So Matt's question is saying, if it is not necessarily the VIP patient, but maybe somebody else in administration that is hand selecting the treatment providers for someone, that then pushes some feelings of discrimination upon the other staff saying, hey, what was wrong with me in my care, right? That's a tricky situation, but I think it would be something that might be able to be looked at by an ethics consult, where we have an objective team that would evaluate the situation to try and have clear communication amongst all parties to evaluate it. But that is a much trickier situation. It's a little different than this because it's not really based on bias or reasoning. It's based on other factors. They may not be pertinent factors, and that maybe could be brought out. So it would be a cross between an ethical issue and an HR issue. But I think it's a little bit different than this specific issue when patients are requesting different providers. Okay, last question.
Do you have some sort of a follow-up for persons, providers, patients who have gone through this process, but like a support group kind of to say, this is how I felt post this, maybe a provider, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do we have anything for our staff who've gone through the situation? And that is part of our policy, and you'll see it in the learning module as well. And you saw it a little bit in the video, right? The manager, the leadership's thing is to going back. Are you okay? They said they're okay having you come back in and care for them. Are you going to be okay with this? Are you sure? Let me know how it's going, right? So there is that sort of follow-up. And I think, those things are possible. We have a tremendous diverse support staff here. We have a lot of organizations that support diversity in our workforce already. I think this could become a part of those. If we need to develop something extra, I think we'd be open to it. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much. Go forth and do your learning modules.